Hi, and welcome to Filmarket Hub Talks. My name is Rosalind, and I'm the UK manager. And today I'm super excited to welcome screenwriter and playwright Vinay Patel here with us today. And Vinay is also on the jury of our TV pilot competition this year. Welcome, Vinay. Thank you so much for joining us online today. I know you're super busy, so we're really thrilled to have you with us.
Happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
And Vinay, I'm going to do my best to introduce you with your really impressive bio, so correct me if I'm wrong, but you started out writing for Fringe Theatre, and your debut play, if I believe I'm right, True Brits, opened the Edinburgh Fringe in 2014 before transferring to the Bush Theatre and Vault Festival. And then you went on to write An Adventure, which ran at the Bush in late 2018.
Yep.
And your first piece for television, Murdered by My Father, won the Royal Television Society Award for Best Single Drama and was nominated for 3 BAFTAs. You've also been named a BAFTA Breakthrough Brit for your work, and have gone on to write for Payne's Plough, ITV, Channel 4 and the BFI. And your most recent work is working on the 11th and 12th series of the wonderful Doctor Who.
Yeah.
So that is a really impressive bio for someone so young. Wow. And are you allowed to tell us what you're currently writing on, or is that top secret?
What am I? I'm working vaguely. I'm working on a couple more plays, a couple of films, and a few TV series. Which, when I say it like that, makes me feel very panicked. But it's all manageable and all very exciting.
Fantastic. That's so exciting. And just go back to the beginning, really. Just really fascinated to ask you, have you always written? What inspired you to become a writer?
Yeah, I guess I was like always that kid writing stories on like my family's like kitchen table and stuff like that. But actually I had quite a convoluted route into doing it. I think just because I think it's quite hard to see it as a viable life, and like there's a distinction between writing and making writing your career, which like whenever I talk to newer writers or emerging writers, tell them not to panic about that, because it's all about creating a good work rather than necessarily doing it for money. Anyway, I went around the house a little bit. I was like a tech at a film school for a little bit. I had a couple of businesses working as like a corporate filmmaker and a corporate headshot photographer and all sorts of strange things that were sort of around writing but never quite writing. And then I just sort of realized that if that's what I wanted to do, I needed to focus on it. And so I ended up doing a master's when I was 24. And that was just a year. I don't think it's something that everyone needs to do, but for me, it was like giving myself permission to just focus on that. I mean, I still had to like work part-time through it. So I'd like run and do like a corporate shoot at lunchtimes and then come back and edit in the evening and stuff. So it was really intense, but just for someone like me, it was nice to give myself the license. And I met lots of wonderful friends and colleagues who I still send my work to, which we'll talk about a little bit later, I guess. And they still help me make sure I'm keeping things to the standard that I want them to be. From there, I went back and got another job and was writing on the side and put on my first play when I was 28, which isn't super old, but relatively late in terms of the playwriting life. But I also, for me, that was really helpful and I don't regret it. And I liked not just my sense of self, knowing that I could do other things apart from writing. It helped me sort of not put that much pressure on it. But yeah, I've been doing it full time probably since 2015. Yeah.
So it's great to hear you're still writing plays too, because I know some writers start in theatre and then move to TV and don't really go back. So is that something you definitely want to keep writing for both?
Yeah, I would say through experience that nothing makes you want to write for theatre like writing for telly. Basically, just because I mean it depends on your sensibilities. Like I think there can be a bit of a trap, the idea that if you're a writer for theatre and you really love that and you really, it's something that people like your work, then naturally you transition to being a television writer. And sometimes it works, but sometimes that isn't what is right for you. For me, I think the thing is with television, it can be, development times are very long. It's very technical. There are lots of like other documents, like, pitch documents and outlines and so many other parts of the process. And that machine can feel a bit wearing sometimes. And there are lots of different places that you get notes from, and like basically you're beholden to lots of other people in a way that, you know, in theatre you still are, but there is, I think, a real love of purity of voice there, which can make it an exciting place to play around with. And I think, you know, television is definitely heading in that direction. And again, we can talk a bit more about that later. But for me, you know, like an adventure is it's kind of this story of a relationship over 60 years across 3 continents, and that, you know, it wasn't like the cheapest play in the world. It was like 3 hours long, but that's like millions and millions and millions of pounds. That's a television show, but I really want to tell that story. I want to do it then. And also, theatre is just really good at being a place where you can sit an audience with a mutual feeling, and just I've come to like, as someone, I didn't grow up with theatre at all, but I've come to really love the idea of keeping people in a space and feeling the same thing, just seeing people react to the same thing. There's something really magical about the liveness of it. So yeah, I think I'll always be the person who jumps back and forth between the two.
I love that. So, you know, I think that's actually such different experiences, as you said.
Yeah.
You know, the theatre experience is just completely magical, really. Can't really compare it, but that's wonderful to hear. Just in terms of when you come to a new project, could you tell us a bit about your writing process? I know there'll be lots of writers watching. It's always great to hear how, you know, screenwriters. Do you spend a lot of time on research for each project, or what's your sort of process?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the individual project. So if it's something like something historically based or something based on real life, then I feel like I need to do enough research to feel confident to throw it away, if that makes sense. Like I think if you try to write, well, for me anyway, if I try to write without knowing something as, you know, as in depth as I possibly can, then I find it quite I find myself stalling quite a lot, because I feel like I have a lot of responsibility to those people. So with something like Murdered by My Father, I was very lucky that came out of the factual department of the BBC, and they had a lot of research there already, and I went and did my own. And I had ideas of what I wanted that story to be and what I thought was interesting about it and what I thought was necessary to pull out of that situation. But yeah, it took me, you know, and I was still researching while writing it in the end, but yeah, it took me a long time. And then something like my first episode of Doctor Who was set during the partition of India, which is a big topic, and you can't cover it all in like 50 minutes, especially like with the sci-fi element and whatnot. But yeah, again, I was researching that for probably a year and a half on itself, and so something like that is a lot heavy. If it's something where I'm just like, that's a situation I think is really funny or really interesting, or I love that character, then I will try and follow that as my first call. I'll just try and see where that character takes me, so I don't lose, because I think it's very easy to have an idea that flashes in your head and it just sort of withers, and that, you know, happens a lot. And sometimes that means the idea isn't quite ready or isn't quite right or doesn't really have the legs that you hoped it would. But I'm getting better at just trying to chase that initial enthusiasm, so I can at least anchor something and come back to it if I need to. So yeah, it flips around. And also I feel like I'm a little bit when it's a play, I feel I'm happy to chase things a little bit. My time in telly, I think, has taught me to be a bit harder on concept and idea at an early stage. So if it's something of my own doing, not a historical thing, I'll like be asking myself, what is it about this idea that compels me? And I think that's something I come back to no matter what the project is just being really, like, you don't have to know necessarily about the wholeness of the plot or the characters or where you want it to go, but just asking yourself to be really clear about what is it that's like really pulls you into it, because the process is long either way and you need to be able to stick it out.
That's fantastic. And you mentioned that you know, you've got on your MA, you kind of obviously met a lot of great colleagues and stuff. Do you have a community around? Obviously, you know, you're working professionally, but do you have a community of writers around you that you sort of share material with, or how do you kind of get feedback at an early stage? Or
yeah, no, I don't use them as much as I used to, because yeah, if I'm hired to write something, then usually I'll lean on the people I'm working with. Yeah. But there are a couple of people that from that MA, and just like I've met during my time in theatre, who I will send relatively early drafts to, because they're people who I trust to understand me and understand what I want to do and what I like doing, but will also not give me a pass. And what that means is they push you to make that work the thing that you say you told them in grand words and excited arm waving what you want it to be, and they just sort of hold you to account for that. And I think that's a really valuable thing. I think it can be quite easy to find people who will tell you how they would do something, but it's very hard to find people who will push you to make it the thing that you want it to be.
That's really great advice, I think, for any writer. Do you have a daily routine? Obviously you're writing full time, so is there any kind of tips you could give, especially emerging screenwriters who are perhaps juggling a day job, which not? Any tips you could pass on about a daily routine?
Yeah, like my routine has shifted over the years, just depending, just because my life has changed a little bit. I think the important thing is that you have some degree of consistency, because I'm a big believer in the fact that creativity is cumulative. So it's not necessarily about going, I've cleared my whole life and I've got this 10 hours to be a genius. I think that puts too much pressure on yourself. Although I've done it with deadline times, I've not been a genius, just hoped that I would be. I think it is just that thing of carving out, even if it's just 10, 15 minutes every day to do something. For me, I need to be quite scheduled, because my brain I find it quite hard to settle down and focus on something, and actually getting the routine of putting myself down at the desk at a certain time. It used to, again, when I was a bit younger, it was 8 in the morning, a bit minutes first thing, and now I let myself do some other things first for other people, go for a run, make sure I don't go entirely mad. I noticed it's really clear to me that when that schedule sort of gets disrupted, the ideas come a little bit less easily. Whereas if you just sort of keep that even if, again, a small block of time every day, then even it means that the stories are sitting in the back of your head and your brain is working on it whenever. So whether you're in the shower or you just go out for your one daily allowance of exercise, or on the phone to your friends, that stuff keeps churning because you keep it present, you keep it at the front of your mind, and your brain learns to sort of switch it on. For me, routine is really important. If you were doing writing as part of having another job, that's actually, for me, was one of the most exciting times to write, because it meant it was it was sort of like the wonderful, joyful thing in my life, where you can escape from the world into your work. And not that it isn't still like that sometimes, but writing is mostly showing up and sitting there in your pants and just typing away for hours and hours and hours, which can become a bit of a drag. So I think don't will away those days, even though I think I think there's a real understandable desire to I just want this to be my entire life. But actually having a life inform that writing work is the most exciting time. And you find I found it actually much easier to tap into the world when I was still had a job alongside it. So don't rush to get out of it. It will help the writing.
It's great to know. And do you have any favorite books on screenwriting that you would recommend?
There's a few I really like, but I think the one I'd mention in the first instance is there's an Alexander McKendrick book called On Filmmaking, which you probably know. I really like that because I started off trying to direct as well, and he was an old Ealing Comedies director and became a screenwriting tutor, and his style is very accessible and very fun, and the book is sort of split into the writing part and how you might handle the directing of it. And what I really like about that is when you're writing a script, because it'll eventually, that's the blueprint for someone else to do something with. And I liked a book that connected up the process of writing with the process of directing, what might ultimately happen with it. But it's really clear on both. And I found it really friendly. I found it really, it's not full of lots of jargon. It's not very intimidating. It's just a really clear and easy guide from someone who really knows what they're doing.
Great recommendation. And you mentioned directing. Is that something you think you'd like to do in the future? Is it on the cards?
I keep telling myself to go back to it. It's just there's always something else to be done. But for sure. For lots of reasons. I think I really love working with actors in particular, and I find that really exciting. I think one of the best reasons to write for theatre in particular is so you get to spend 4 weeks in a rehearsal room with actors, because there is genuinely nothing more exciting than you having written this long, laborious passage and realizing you can just cut most of it, can actors doing it with their face, like the clarity, that filter of other people's. It's like I really love that process. And yeah, I tell myself I'm gonna say it, I'm gonna do it now. I'm gonna go do some more directing, just so I hold myself to accountable. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Well, we'll send you this link so you've got it to put it in your and just for the I mean, screenwriting is a very long process, isn't it? It can be a very lonely process, especially obviously if you're in lockdown, everyone's lonely, but just in kind of normal life. What do you recommend to writers to kind of stay motivated? Do you have any tips on that?
Ooh, yeah, I think don't let a project drag. I mean, I would set up a schedule for yourself, and I know that like, especially nowadays, it can be quite hard to stick to those things, but something about going, I'm not just going to let this explode into every part of my life, going, I'm going to spend this many hours on this many hours on this many, like I can help make something really daunting seem really possible. On the social side of things though, like I think get a WhatsApp group of friends. Like nothing has saved me more this year, I think, than like having like 4 or 5 people in a group that are just bent about work who I similarly feel. And like when we don't live in pandemic land anymore, I found showing up to the same space with a person or a couple of people and doing it together, even if you're not talking, the idea, it kind of holds you a bit accountable to know that someone else is there. So there's an app called what's it called, like Forest, which is basically where I haven't used it for a little bit, but I used it was really effective for a time. And what it is you and a friend basically sign on at the same time, and you like grow a tree together. And if one of you uses your phone in that time, it kills the tree. It's like a really small, like emotive stakes thing. It's like, I don't want to be that person who killed the tree. I'm just going to keep focused. But yeah, it's like, you know, a 90-minute timer or 120-minute timer or like 20-minute timer. And then it's what's nice is at the end of that, you ask your friend, you know, how did you do? And just having that little bit of bounce with someone else, I found when things are very lonely or feel really bleak, is just a nice way to keep going, but have a social side to it.
Do you use any other apps to sort of assist your writing or screenwriting process?
Yeah, like I've become that person. Like whenever I'm feeling really, really like I don't want to do it, just having like a simple timer thing, like that doesn't have to be an app. It can be like a kitchen timer. Like I have become a big advocate of that, just because it's a non-threatening way of going, like, here is 25 minutes, just put your face in front of this for now, and just having it there and keeping you accountable, but like not seeming like a massive use of time is yeah, really handy. I used to use an internet blocker, but I don't anymore. I just literally I've got into a thing very recently actually where it's the opposite of an app, which is I don't turn my phone on until 12 o'clock. If I can, like some days like today. So, yeah,
that's right. It's super disciplined, and it just, I guess that just blocks out all the kind of distraction and noise.
Yeah, I think it's just it's because it's hard. Like, although this is like very specific to right now, but I found both lockdown life is both very lonely, but also there can be like a lot of noise, and because you're reaching for that socialization, you are trying to find a way of keeping as a person in the world. But actually, I think to be a good writer, sometimes you have to kind of embrace the boredom and loneliness a little bit. So I had to go to the extreme thing of like, I'll turn off my phone before I go to bed, and then I try to not turn it on till midday, and annoyingly that works. Like, I wish it didn't, but it does. And I just found that I get at least a good couple of hours done in the morning.
And this is really more for like our emerging writers who are listening to this, but so getting feedback on your script, you know, especially when you're a kind of young, not necessarily young by age, but like a new emerging writer, it can be quite hard to sort of filter that feedback and know how to navigate that, especially when you're in either a first job or you're looking to break through. Could you give our listeners any advice on how to handle feedback and when to sort of stick to your guns and how to kind of navigate that?
Yeah, that can be really political, because especially in television, because you are literally being hired to do it, and there'll always be divergent opinions. I think the trick is to listen to everything but not action everything. Yeah. So I think it's that thing of people. I don't mean to ignore people. It's just that thing of, if these are the people you're working with and might be for a couple of years, then you need to be able to accept that they're gonna have an opinion of the work that maybe you won't share, but that comes from them trying to grasp it. Hopefully in a position where you like and respect your collaborators, and so the things that they're saying to you, might be something for a different project or taking it in a slightly different direction. I think what's really important is, first of all, you understand very fully what you're trying to do with it, so you can articulate why if there's a note that you don't agree with or you think might change something vital. It's really important for you to be able to get that across to them. And in most cases, I think people understand that. They just want to know that they've been heard.
There's an old maxim of trying to find the note behind the note. So if someone is suggesting, hey, why don't we put that character in a car and send them off a cliff? The thing that they're suggesting there might not be right for your project. But
if you just ask them, it's like, oh, I'm interested for you, what's motivating that? And it might just be like, oh, I'm just looking for a bit more jeopardy here, or I think it's lulling a bit and trying to find action. So people jump to a solution rather than trying to interrogate necessarily what's created that. So if you're in doubt about something, I think pushing for clarity is always worthwhile, and you shouldn't be scared of doing that, because the thing you'll regret most is taking a note you don't agree with, making it happen for the sake of it, and then finding you hate it. But on the flip of that, also, I think I have found it very useful. I had a funny thing when I was working on my last play, where I would go in a notes meeting, disagree with absolutely everything the dramaturg was telling me, and then the day later I'll be like, oh yeah, you're absolutely right. So sometimes I think there can be a thing where you are too close to something and you will immediately reject something that someone has told you. So again, if you respect your collaborators and you understand they have the best intentions for you and the project at heart, I think it is worth saying, hey, can I just take a couple of days or something to digest that fully, and come back to you. Again, I think having that clarity of communication of what you're trying to do and also your intentions is really useful, and to ask that of other people is really important, just to make sure you're all working on the same project.
That's superb advice, thank you. And again, really for our emerging writers, particularly in this time, I'm interested to ask you, do you think there's a lot of development going on? Are people still developing a lot of material? And for new emerging writers looking to get their first break, what advice could you give them in terms of what they're writing, and also sort of how to get their work out there?
Yeah, I think there is a lot of development going. I think it probably slowed a little bit, but at least from my perspective, I'm seeing lots of people trying to get going again, especially now production will hopefully become a little bit easier in the months to come. I think, there'll be a little bit of backlog with projects, but there are a lot more platforms. There's probably a lot more money coming into it. There is a lot more appetite for risk. And so to end with that, I think when you're trying to break in, for me, I wrote so True Brits was the play. It was a one person play that I wrote to be the cheapest thing I could possibly write, and if I needed to, I could learn to act and do it myself. I had no money, but the thing I told myself was, how do I make this the fullest distillation of the things that I care about and what I see as my style as a writer? So it wasn't, it was a very clear calling card, as much as I don't love that phrase, of who I am as a writer and as a person. And that kind of did everything for me. It opened lots of doors, because I think it's easier to put your heart into something like that. And for me, I find it really difficult to sort of go through the motions of a project. I need to really, really know what it is. Again, as I said earlier, what compels me about it, what's keeping me in it. I think the idea is, a lot of people get into the head of oh, if only I could structure something perfectly, then that'll be it. Or I need to be able to write a very competent cop show or something like that. That'll be the way I get in it. But actually, I was a reader at theatres. I've read lots of scripts, and the thing that I think is always compelling to a reader is something that maybe isn't necessarily quite there craft-wise, but is
has a fascinating point of view, has an undeniably compelling central character,
is something maybe familiar done in an unfamiliar way. Basically dig into, like, really let yourself be the person that you are in it. Like, don't try and be something you're not, because you'll just hate it and you won't actually you won't find the fullness of your voice.
Amazing. And just because we, at Filmarket, we do, and all our kind of contests and calls that we have, writers have to have, especially through the obviously a fully developed pilot and also a full Bible. So we ask a lot, actually, do you have any advice for writers on the Bible? Because, there's so much advice and also that there's no kind of fully wrong or right way how to do it. But any advice you could give our writers on that?
Yeah, I mean, I've written a couple of Bibles, some of them quite short. One of them was like 60 pages long, which was like that was really interesting because I got commissioned for a script and actually went back to them. So I'd like to write the series Bible first, so I get a sense of I can build that world out in its fullness. I think it is understanding who that document is for. So, for example, a 60-page document is not necessarily a useful thing for like a commissioner or someone else who might want to greenlight the show, but it might be useful for a story team when you're trying to either bring other writers on board or get everyone to understand exactly the specifics of what you're talking about. I think you just need the very basics for a Bible for me are a clear idea of the world, the characters, and the tone. If you can set those out really clearly, I think that's important. If it's a returnable series, giving a brief idea of what might be coming in the future. You don't have to work that out fully, but I think that just gives people a sense of where a story's going. A couple of paragraphs or just a single one, depending on how much you've thought about it for every episode, I think is useful. Just for me, a Bible should be a document you can get excited about without the script alongside it. Like it should be its own thing. There is and there are loads of examples online to find. One of my favorites is Ronald D. Moore's Battlestar Galactica story Bible. I don't know if you've ever seen that. It's an astonishing document. It's very confident as a piece of writing, and it's massive and entirely over detailed. But you sit down and read that, and there's no question that person knows what they want that show to be and what they're trying to do with it. Like, I think the very first line of it is the aim of the show is to reinvent the sci-fi television sci-fi. So it's like it makes a big statement in town. You don't need to, but there's something in that clarity of understanding the intention of the writer and the team generally, which is very useful for a document like that.
Great advice. And just from what you've seen and in your own experience, do you think that we're going to have any? Can you sort of predict any emerging trends that we'll see on our screens this year and next year? And how do you think the pandemic has kind of influenced writing?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm necessarily someone who works commissioning or maybe know a bit more about trends, but for me, I think I see a lot of experimentations with tone, which to me is really exciting. I think because there are a lot of shows, lots of brilliant shows out there, things that sort of come at things from a slightly sideways direction feel like they cut through, and I find that really fun personally. I think there's a lot of experimentation in story format. So there was, a received wisdom of comedy is roughly half an hour and drama is an hour. You've seen a lot more attempts at pushing to something like a half an hour slot for a drama or something closer to that, but spanning more episodes. So I think that's a useful thing to understand when you're developing a spec, is to go, actually the shape of the way we tell stories is shifting a little bit, and that can be exciting. I think there's there's like a Nick Hornby series, which is like 10 by 10 minutes, which you probably won't get away with to start off with. But so I think there's a real variation in tone and real variation in story shape.
I think there's a lot of work that's trying to grasp what the future's going to look like. I think there's, the last few years, there's been a real pull towards sci-fi, a lot of it dystopian, and I think that's relatively understandable. But I think I detect,
maybe this is just because it's what I'm really interested in, I detect a sort of trend for stories that are looking at how there's a place for healing or difference or change there, as opposed to everything is going to be awful forever. I think that's interesting. I don't know what the pandemic will do for the stories people tell. I do know I have tried to, like, it is really funny whenever I'm pitching a new idea or a variation of something we're developing, I'm like, oh yeah, that's just because I've just been stuck inside for a long time. Like, that's why I think that's a really compelling idea. Like, I'm working on a Chekhov adaptation. Like, one of my plays is a Chekhov, and like I just remember. Sorry, I know this is not television specific, but I just remember when I was younger, or when I first seen my first Chekhov plays, I was like, I don't get this. Like, everyone's just inside and bored all the time. Like, just like they can't get anywhere. I can't relate to this at all. And now I'm like, oh yeah, there it is.
Yeah.
I totally get it now.
So that has actually helped me write that with feeling and gusto.
Great advice. And finally, any advice for our writers who are going to be submitting to the TV pilot competition? Any kind of advice you'd give them?
So I say this from my own discoveries and failures, so hopefully it'll be useful to you. Don't try and do too much in the pilot episode. I think there is a real temptation to go, I've had all these brilliant ideas and these wonderful characters, and I need you to understand them all here because it's the only shot I'm going to get. What you want to do is prioritize the story that's going to be the driver of your series. I would try and craft an episode that is reflective of what the series will be week to week, or however it goes out, because I think there is a temptation to make a very jazzy, exciting pilot, and then actually the series isn't like that at all. And so something that's an example of what the audience should expect going forward is really useful. You don't have to, there's that advice about having characters that are relatable.
And of course, it's never about that. It's about characters that are compelling.
Yeah.
And I think what makes things compelling is understanding what that person cares about. And the thing that they care about could be incredibly niche. And I think that's a really exciting thing about television at the moment, is that you can find something that sounds on the surface very dull or very, very specific, but actually that specificity is a real strength, because I think people love being immersed in specific worlds that are different from their own, like, especially nowadays. It's a bit like traveling without having to go there, because you can't. So I would push myself to be as specific as possible. I would push myself to be as clear as possible. I would push myself to not throw everything at it for the sake of demonstrating the work. Just stick to what is the story here that people are going to come back to week to week.
Brilliant advice, Vinny. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been absolutely wonderful to have you, and we all look forward to watching the next Vinay Patel, either show or series. Are you allowed to give us a hint of anything that might be coming on the screen soon, or? Or not?
No. I think, yeah.
We'll look out.
Hopefully, yeah, some exciting things very soon.
And we're absolutely thrilled that you're part of the jury this year. So it's a real honour to have you.
I can't wait to read them. I'm excited.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.